This summer, I had the opportunity to teach in Peru. So I taught a course in food justice and nutrition, and my students and colleague and I traveled to different rural and urban areas looking at the food environment, culture, and diet of Peruvians. If you don't know, Peru is a developing country, and the average person earns about $275 a month. So we traveled through the Andean mountains and going to small villages, some of them hours away on windy dirt roads. And as we entered these villages, we didn't see big supermarkets or fast food restaurants. We saw small, fresh markets and people who grew their own food. So we talked to some of the people from the village, and they would show us their banana trees and their yucca bushes, and they would also then take us and show us their cows and their pigs and chickens, and they'd point up in the mountains and say, way up there is where I have my beans and my quinoa. It's about a 3-hour walk. And so I would ask them, do you ever sell any of the food you produce? And they would look at me weird and say, no, we consume it or we share it with our neighbors. So then I would say, well, what do you eat? And they would talk about eating their fresh cheese and some fruits and vegetables and their quinoa and beans. So their diet seemed pretty nutritionally adequate. And actually in Peru, there's a pretty low prevalence of malnutrition for it being a developing country. We also spent time in the urban area, and we spent time in areas of low income and then also wealthier. And no matter where I was, there was always a fresh food market. They were on about every other block. And I could walk into one of these little markets and get some broccoli and beets and onions and bananas and apples and have about 2 full bags of produce, and I would spend about $2 to $3. The environment just was so different to me than what I'm used to here in the U.S. In the U.S., about 12.9% of people are considered to be food insecure. Food security is the access by all people at all time to sufficient food for an active, healthy life. It's the ability to obtain nutritionally adequate and safe food, and the ability to obtain it in a socially acceptable way. So not having to go dumpster diving or steal for food or use some other type of coping mechanism. We use a 10 or 18 item questionnaire here in the US to measure food insecurity. And that questionnaire measures most of the constructs that I listed in the definition, but it does not directly measure dietary quality, therefore failing to really be able to see if someone can consume a diet that leads to a healthy, active life. We have many federal and community programs that address food insecurity. For example, 80% of our federal Farm Bill funding goes to nutrition assistance programs, not to the agricultural sector. And many of these programs are used to increase the purchasing power of a family or an individual for food, and they do just that. However, research also shows that people that live in food insecurity still have poor dietary quality and high rates of obesity and chronic disease. Well, it's not just people with that are food insecure. 3/4 of us do not consume an adequate amount of fruits and vegetables, and we overconsume refined sugars, saturated fat, and sodium. Yes. 3/4 of us. It's time we change the conversation from just food insecurity to what is inhibiting any of us from consuming a healthy diet. To stop labeling as food insecure and to change the conversation to healthy eating for all. To create a societal culture around healthy eating. If we did that, we would eradicate food insecurity and have a great impact on our healthcare system, mental health, and our economy. So I have a few things for us to consider of how to make this happen. We need to first focus on our agricultural sector. Did you know that we do not import or produce enough fruits and vegetables for all of us to consume the recommended amounts? We've already set ourselves up for failure. Our agricultural policies encourage the production of wheat, corn, and soy. When you walk into the grocery store, where do you find these products? In refined processed foods, right? What would it look like in terms of food access and food availability of quality foods if our agricultural policies encourage the production of fruits and vegetables? What if you walked into a school and every child was eating a home-cooked meal? One day I was talking to a man from Mexico, and he was telling me that his children always consumed their traditional foods in the home until they went to school. And once they started going to school, they came home and started to ask for hamburgers and French fries and pizza and fast food. My sister-in-law is an indigenous Guatemalan woman and lives in a village in Guatemala. She and a few of her friends and family members produce 800 meals for school children every single day from her own home. They make fresh beans, tortillas, rice, chicken with sauce over it, and deliver it. If she can do it with little resources, I think we can do it here in the U.S. as well. What if we started to teach home economics again and kids how to cook? If every kid went through high school and graduated knowing how to cook? What if we had a little fresh market on every other block in urban areas, just like I saw in Peru? What if our fast food restaurants focused on dietary quality first instead of just food quantity? What if we took our nice, green, manicured lawns and turned them into food production areas, just like my friends I spoke to in Peru? What if? What if we all came together and started to share and eat food together again? What if we learned a little bit from a developing country and adapted it here to our developed country? What if we had the audacity to change the conversation from one of just food quantity to one of food quality? Thank you.
That's a lot to think about.
I know. I'm sorry.
So the picture that you paint for me is one that I would love to see happen.
Yeah.
And how do you move the needle on something so big in our own way, in our lives? What can we be doing to start to affect some of this change that you've talked about and that you've showed could be possible?
Yeah, it is. It's very overwhelming, right, when you look at that. I think it's very small things. Just being aware of if you're taking something into your office at work, maybe don't take the donuts, right, but choose something a little bit healthier. So start to change that culture at work. If you can, put a small garden at your house and then put a table out front with some produce that people can take. When you donate to food banks or food pantries, think about what you're donating and the nutrition quality of it. If you're so I'm a soccer mom, and so after soccer games, I always give like fruits and water and things that are healthier instead of like chips and cookies. So it's always just kind of being aware of also, what kind of culture are we feeding into? So the church potluck, think again about what's something of nutrition value that I can take. So I think it's just small things like that for us to be aware of to start to change that culture.
And you had also said during one of our conversations, looking into a CSA, and that was something that was, can you talk a little bit about that and why you think that that's important to spur this kind of change on?
Yeah, so, sometimes gardening is really overwhelming for people, but there's other people out there that know how to do it and are really good at it. And so, again, when I talk about our agricultural policies and not having the policies that encourage fruits and vegetables, we can encourage the production with our own money in our own pockets. So if we also are buying at farmers markets, or if we're buying into a community-supported agriculture, that's also influencing our economy and giving jobs for other people to be able to do it.